we work with distilleries that sometimes don't get outside of their backyard and deserve to have a wider audience, either on the national or global stage. And so that's really the clarity that we're trying to present with Lost Lantern, is this curatorial voice to cut through the noise of all of these distilleries that have popped up, some making really exceptional things, but without the marketing budget or the wherewithal or the desire to get outside of their town or little corner of the world, and some who still need a few more years to hone their craft. So we want to show off these whiskeys and the simplicity of this cocktail, the simplicity and the transparency with which we present things is really so that you can develop your own sense of what your favorite whiskeys are.
We caught up with Drew Record, the mixologist and California state manager for Lost Lantern, an independent bottler of American whiskey. He uses Lost Lantern's Soaring Spice Straight Bourbon from Frey Ranch, Nevada, to make his drink on the shores of Lake Lahontan.
The inspiration for this cocktail comes from some of my favorite classic whiskey pairings. Things like the Bobby Burns and the Vieux Carré play on the flavors of Benedictine and whiskey, bringing in sort of sweet flavors from the sweet vermouth. In this cocktail, we've taken sweet vermouth out of the equation because it's summertime. It gets really hot in Fallon, Nevada. This is swapping out that sweet vermouth for sarsaparilla. Sarsaparilla is one of those old-fashioned Western sodas, and if you can't find sarsaparilla, cream soda, root beer, those will all work to play around with. You just want to think about things that have a nice spicy flavor profile, probably not a cola necessarily, but something that's going to have notes of vanilla, some earthy notes, maybe some licorice, maybe some toasted marshmallow. These are the sort of things that we're looking for as a base level of flavor for this highball.
So I was about to say, this is a highball style of cocktail.
Everything has been done under the sun in cocktails. There is nothing new. Phil Ward in New York, likes to call certain cocktails Mr. Potato Head cocktails. Here on the West Coast, when I was at Trick Dog, we like to play cocktail inception, and that was using one cocktail as the base spirit for another cocktail. And so that's kind of the idea here, honestly, is what if we had a Bobby Burns bottled up and we decided to use that as the base for a highball. And so that is the direction here, taking the Soaring Spice, a little Benedictine. Benedictine is a French liqueur, originally a recipe made by monks, no longer made by monks like chartreuse, but it also means that you can probably find Benedictine more readily. Now, if you can't find Benedictine on your shelf, you could pull, any lower proof Amaro that you have, right? Something that, isn't over the top. We're not talking about throwing, Fernet Branca in here by any means, but, something in the 20 to 30% alcohol range, something that, again, has all of those sort of cinnamon, clove, baking spice things that you find in Benedictine. This is a fun cocktail to be playful, and we're not trying to be prescriptive here. This is you're sitting around with friends, it's warm, you want to make some delicious highballs. What do you have on your back bar, right? So you can take your Soaring Spice as a base, then using your modifier of choice that's got some spice, got some sweetness, and then some sort of soda, a sarsaparilla, a root beer, a cream soda, and make yourself a delicious highball.
Can you show us how it's done then, please?
Absolutely. So this one is relatively simple because, again, we are trying to make this, no fuss. You could even make this by the pitcher if you wanted to, right? So, we're starting with 1.5 ounces of Soaring Spice as our base. So we're going to put that down into our frosted mug here first. I like a little bit shorter glasses so I get less soda. If you want more soda, you can use a slightly bigger glass. But, we've got 1.5 ounces there to start. We're going to put a scant 1/2 ounce of the Benedictine. I'm going to go a little bit lighter because I'm using a smaller glass. If you're going with a bigger glass, you could go with the full 1/2 ounce. You could be playful. This Benedictine is a dusty bottle I recovered from a shop actually on the way to Fallon, Nevada, in the middle of nowhere, probably from the 60s, judging by the distributor stamp on the back. But it's one of those liqueurs that actually improves with age. So I'm putting that 1/2 ounce in there. Now, I like to build my highballs without the ice first. That way I'm not over diluting things, and also I know how much room I've got for my soda, because I want to make sure that I'm getting my proportions correct first. So, I've got my sarsaparilla here, and I'm going to put 3 ounces, which leaves plenty of room for ice. Room for ice, a little bit of room to just top off with a bit more soda. And then to finish this guy, we're just going to put a pinch of fleur sel, so the good finishing salt from the kitchen. And then I've got some lemons that I picked off my tree. A little bit of citrus oil expressed over the top just helps to bring out some of those spice flavors, balance the sweetness a bit. You can give that a stir to combine, and you're all ready to go. Very simple. You've built in the glass, no extra shaking tins, no mixing glasses necessary. Again, you could make a pitcher of this for friends. You could batch up your whiskey and your modifier, keep those off to the side. People can pour and choose their soda. It can become kind of a choose your own adventure for a nice little holiday.
Now, with the sea salt that you used, what's the importance of that?
So, in making cocktails, I seek balance, and so we are talking about adding 2 very sweet things. Sarsaparilla with a cane sugar base has a lot of sweetness, more sweetness than sweet vermouth would, and Benedictine or our Amaros that we'd be plugging in, have a lot of sweetness as well. And so while this whiskey is at barrel strength and has some oomph to it to help stand up to those sweeter ingredients, I find that a little bit of salt helps to balance out a sweet cocktail. Just like a little bit of salt is going to help balance a good recipe in the kitchen, it's no different there.
Now, how would you generally describe the flavor of this?
I think the most surprising thing when you put all of this together is that when you layer clove on top of clove on top of clove, sometimes it actually has the opposite effect of amplifying that, and instead it flattens those flavors out, which allow other flavors to come forward. And so, what I find is most prominent in this cocktail are the things that you might miss in Benedictine or in sarsaparilla. Notes like evergreen or winter mint, notes like eucalyptus or like sagebrush, like kind of green notes that start to come out because there is so much of that baking spice that your palate is hit with. It's almost able to like scoot past it and see what's behind. And I think that's another thing that the salt helps do is to create those layers that your taste buds can really tack onto.
Now, most whiskey nerds would assume that you would be producing whiskies that are sipping whiskies and not necessarily for cocktails, but then I suppose you wouldn't have a job.
Well, it's funny. There was a point in my life when I would say, no, 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 you can't drink that whiskey, that way, right? I was a young bartender and I got a ticket once for a very expensive scotch mixed with cranberry juice. And I called the server over and, I put my hands on my hips and I said, I'm not going to pour this. And then I realized, no, I just need to get over myself. And so when we put together these cocktails for Lost Lantern, we anticipate that most likely you're going to be sipping this whiskey, but we like to take this as a jumping off place for cocktails. So we know that maybe you're not going to mix this entire bottle into cocktails, but it might give you inspiration for something to do with another bottle of whiskey that you have on your shelf, or another whiskey from, our friends here at Frey Ranch who distill it, right? And so we really want to keep whiskey drinkers engaged in trying new things. And so while we know that you're probably not going to put all of this into cocktails, we like to be playful and give you some inspiration.
Now, you're using a Soaring Spice Fay Ranch Nevada Straight Bourbon. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that particular expression?
Yeah, so Frey Ranch is a whiskey that here in the Western United States is very well known for being relatively young. Outside of the Western United States, it hasn't necessarily picked up as much name recognition. But what's really fascinating about Frey Ranch, and one of the reasons why we love working with them, is that they grow everything that they distill. And so the area that they're in Fallon, Nevada, and the reason why the cocktail is named after this ancient lake bed, it's in this interesting watershed spot that while they're in high desert, they have access to this deep water table that allows them to grow wheat and corn and rye and barley and be able to malt things on site and do all of this and be incredibly experimental. They've made whiskey from spelt, they've played around with all kinds of things, right? And so that is one of the reasons why this particular cocktail, bringing out some spice characteristics, because this release is 4 barrels that we put together with them. We called it Soaring Spice. We name all of our distillery blends with something that is evocative of what's in there. We don't necessarily want to give you a tasting note necessarily, but give you an idea from release to release. And while Frey Ranch, their 4-grain bourbon, is not particularly known to be spicy, we know that the alchemy of the same whiskey distilled on the same day off of the same still run, going into the same barrel type, sitting 2 racks over, can be wildly different, right? And this was no different. When Nora and Adam, made it to Fallon in the middle of a crazy snowstorm in January, they hunkered down for a couple of days and tasted through about 40 or 50 barrels, of which we ended up sourcing 8 to 10, I think. Some of those went into this, some of those went into our flagship Far Flung bourbon, and one we released as a single barrel last summer. But generally speaking, that bourbon isn't very spice forward, and nothing is different about the mash bill from what went into this Soaring Spice than what went into that single barrel. Again, it's just that alchemy of how all of that reacts to the barrel and the atmospheric conditions. And so, Nora and Adam found these whiskeys that were a little bit more spice forward and thought, well, this is a different side of Frey Ranch. Let's show that off. Often folks don't have a vocabulary for what they like because they like something, but they don't know why they like something. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to give you so much information, is so that you can determine, hey, I like bourbon because of this, right? Or I like things that are in this type of cask because they make me feel this certain sort of way. And so that's part of the shining a light mission statement for Lost Lantern, is helping whiskey lovers who have been drinking for decades or have just started out find new favorites and develop the reasoning for why they love something so that they can go out and seek out their next favorite whiskey.
What about the flavors or the experience with this cocktail do you think represents the brand?
When I was a younger bartender, it was all about complicated. We were going to throw as many ingredients as things as we possibly could. And I think there was a lot of us in the early aughts that got to 7, 8, 9, 10 ingredient cocktails. And then the guest would sit there looking at us with our little twirly mustaches and our leather aprons and go, hey, am I ever going to get this drink? And so, there's been this pendulum swing back towards simplicity. And so, it's like the Coco Chanel rule. Not what can we add to this, but what can we take away, right? When we look at ourselves in the mirror, when we look at this drink, when we think about what we're going to have, what can we take away that then amplifies what we're tasting? And so I think that's what speaks to Lost Lantern, because what we are trying to do is cut through all of the noise about American distilleries. There are thousands of American distilleries making whiskey now. And for someone who is in the whiskey industry, it's difficult for me to keep track of them all, right? And for the average consumer here in the States, let alone someone on a global audience, to understand the who, what's, whys, and wheres, that's what we are trying to do, is curate a collection of whiskeys through our partnerships with these distilleries, of planting our flag and saying, these are the best folks making whiskey in America, either that they are making the best hands down in a particular style, or this is something that is so delicious in this region and it's unknown anywhere else. Transparency is key for us. And so when they see the bottle, they're going to see, our name on the top, so that they've got the familiarity. It's a Lost Lantern bottling, but then it's going to have all the information on who distilled it, where it was distilled, when it was distilled. What we can't fit on the front label, we'll put on the back label, and so you'll get information about maturation, information about mash bill, and what doesn't fit in the copy on the back label then goes on our website, because we are whiskey nerds for whiskey nerds, and we want to make sure that every bit of information that we have access to is passed along to the people drinking Lost Lantern.